Hey, how y'all doing out there this evening? Sitting out here enjoying a nice evening myself, and I couldn't help but notice the news about how Venezuela is sending 100 tons of aid over to Cuba, and a lot of people wouldn't think much about that. But as we know, there's a war going on in Venezuela to take over their oil, and it looks like it's a Cold War, like the Cold War never ended. They may not call it the Soviet Union no more, but Russia and China still aren't our buddies, and they still want to be the superpowers of the world. And with all the changes going on and the way history seems to be repeating itself, I just want to bring up what happened just here back in 1961 when John F. Kennedy blockaded the Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union, from bringing aid to Cuba, which turned out to be nuclear weapons. Um, I'm not saying that that's happening now, but what I do see is hundreds of tons or 100 tons of aid going to Cuba, but they're not having a crisis. And Venezuela's sending it, who don't do a whole bunch of that around the world, for that matter. Russia has buddied up with the elected president there, and the United States decided with some character out of nowhere that's claiming to be president. So they're trying to cause civil unrest down there. Russia has always been trying to find closer land to the United States to set up bases, just like the United States has done all around the world to set up bases to get near Russia and China. So this Cold War has never stopped. These superpowers play games with the little people, and we, the people, are now in the firing line. Like I said, I am not trying to promote fear. I'm trying to remind you of history and to remind you also that history has been repeating itself pretty much over and over and over since 2001 in the War on Terror. We keep hearing that same story and that same narrative, but this is the same stories that many of you may not remember from the Cold War, which started about the 50s and supposedly ended in the 80s, but just changing the name of a country does not change their patriotism or their ideology or the fact that the person that broke them, which was the United States, and broke them over in Afghanistan in the 80s with their 10-year war with Afghanistan. Just being broke don't change the country. They still have their nuclear weapons. They still have their military. They still have their power. And they want this oil in Venezuela just as bad as the United States. So y'all be very careful and pay attention to what's going on. Venezuela giving Cuba 100 tons of aid. Hey, diplomatically and humanely, that sounds great. But guess what? Care packages don't get checked. If you're saying it's food and it's aid, it don't get checked. That's how a lot of these sterilizing vaccines and stuff get spread around, and many people have busted that out because these packages don't get checked. So it could be anything. Pay attention to this war going on in Venezuela. It is in our backyard. It is our government once again meddling in the affairs of other countries, and they get mad at us and they get into bed with big other superpowers. And guess what? The BRICS nations would love, since Brazil's right there in South America, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, would love to have Venezuela and Cuba on board. Wouldn't that be dandy to have all these countries that hate us because of this administration, or actually because of the way we've been ruling the world? I take that back. The way we've been ruling oil since World War II and controlling things with our military, would love to be all on our back door, all have us surrounded. We don't have hardly anything but enemies in the world, and it seems funny. I will say this. It seems mighty suspicious to me that our government makes enemies with our allies, especially our border country nations, Mexico and Canada, and just alienates us from the rest of the world. All of a sudden, in 2 years, we're the biggest pieces of shit like we wasn't already. But now nobody cares about us. They'd love to see us wiped out. We need to think about that. Russia had played with the internet and played with people's feelings by putting memes and false stories out there. We know this. Now look at what they're doing with Venezuela. They got them at a point where they're mad at the U.S., and the U.S. is down there messing with their government, their military, and their mines, and their oil, and their people. So why wouldn't they get in bed with Russia? What is being sent to Cuba? You need to think about stuff like this, y'all. It's bad enough that we face environmental disasters, catastrophes that are coming our way. It's bad enough that they spray the skies and poison our water and our food. It's bad enough that war is knocking on our back door. Yet we're still fussing and fighting about who we are, or hating our brother because he's different than us. We, the people, have to unite against these superpowers, y'all. At least take this little bit of land we got and see that everybody on this country, on this continent, period, even in the whole world, we, the people, the regular people, are in the line of fire, and we're tired of it. We're tired of being played with. We're tired of being toyed. And our only answer is our own brotherhood. It's always been the answer. It always will be the answer. We, the people, we have to stop this. So we're not wanting to be murdered and surrounded by enemies of the world. Think about that. We are the solution. We may be in a line of fire right now, but we're the solution to it. Think about that. Pay attention to this war. Pay attention to what goes on and love your brother just like you love yourself, and we can all love this planet, and maybe these wars will stop. Think about that. I love y'all. Peace. Pay attention and don't live in fear.